Hi, my name's Krishna. I'm from IPRS Health. I've been a physio for approximately 12 years, working in musculoskeletal health and chronic pain. So, welcome to the Committing to Change module by IPRS Health. So, let's run through the contents of what you're about to sort of see and hear. So, we're going to look at what is change. So, essentially, we're going to look at the cycle of change. What can help me make change? So looking at readiness, willingness, importance, and confidence specifically is key focuses to helping you make change and really trying to understand those concepts as well. Then we're going to look at how do I sustain change and make it relevant to me? So how do I maintain change? And how do I get to a point where you can terminate the change that you are kind of embarking on to a point of success and then move on to another type of change or lifestyle change. And then we'll look at some key messages really to try and summarize for you as well. So, committing to change. So I guess the best thing is really to understand that hopefully by the end of this module, you'll hopefully take away some key principles and top tips to committing to change for the benefit and improvement in the way in which you cope with a chronic health condition. This really is going to take into account the evidence around behavior change. We're going to look at a model and how do we sustain change, and hopefully this will provide you some practical ways that you can put this in practice and make it relevant to you as well. So I guess the best place to start is what is change. So the model that you can see is a cycle model of change. So change essentially is the process of causing a function, practice, or thing to become different somehow compared to what it is at present or what it was in the past. I guess at one time or another, most of us have embarked on an effort to change some part of ourselves or our lives. I guess whether this is stopping smoking, starting to save up, losing a few pounds, or getting a new job, as a rule, these sorts of changes don't really occur overnight, and we know that change essentially is a multi-stage process, and things have to evolve either by the way that we think, act, behave, start to do things. So this model of change was conceived in the early 1980s by a psychologist called James Prochaska. He came up with this readiness to change model, and it's encouraged a lot of people to kind of rethink about the most effective way and appropriate ways to support themselves in accomplishing their goals. I guess one interesting thing is that we reflect on almost the Nike advert, just do it, which is all well and good, I guess, in some senses. But just doing it is obviously a good way for some people, but in other ways, not so good, because sometimes we don't really think about what we're about to do. And then if we get to a point where we have a bit of a relapse or we fall back, we can't quite understand why that is the case, even though we just went ahead and tried something. So Prochaska points out that change evolves from a subtle, complex, and sometimes almost going full circle sort of stage, I guess, or journey. I guess it really involves thinking, hesitating, stepping forward, sometimes I guess stepping back, and quite possibly we have to kind of start all over again. And I bet a few of us have experienced that, where we try to do something and change, and actually we've stumbled back into old habits and we can't quite figure out why. And it sometimes takes a lot of reflection and figuring out to why did I kind of go back to what I was doing before, because I was doing so well trying this new activity or new routine out. So that's something that we're going to visit today. So I think we should probably start with identifying each stage of change so that you can relate to it and understand kind of maybe where you sit at this point in time on this sort of cycle of change. So let's start with pre-contemplation. So essentially, people in pre-contemplation wish to change, but for the immediate future, essentially have really no plans to do it. But I guess we've got to ask ourselves, why is that the case? People in this stage tend to not be so fully aware of all the potential benefits, I guess, or they may feel sort of disinclined to try because of past failed attempts or lack of, available energy or motivation to start even thinking about things. So in pre-contemplation, people underestimate the benefits of changing and overestimate the cons or the costs. They're not particularly conscious of that, so it's not a focused, rational decision-making process. I guess weighing the pros and cons of a behavior is important because this component really starts the beginning of why we're going to embark on this change, and we're going to move through certain stages. So you're in the pre-contemplation stage if. So I'll give you a bit of a rundown at each stage in this sort of way. So you're in pre-contemplation if you've heard plenty of times from your doctor or spouse or your friends, or maybe your own conscious sitting thinking about things, that you should make a change, but you're not really seriously considering doing anything about it anytime soon. It might kind of feel like a little bit too much work, or just plain it's not for you. And when somebody tries talking to you about it, whether it's reducing drinking, improving your lifestyle, like healthy lifestyle, losing weight, doing exercises, starting to try and manage your condition in a certain way that works for you, you tend to kind of tune out, shut down, or sort of change the subject. So you might be able to recognize whether you're in this stage from that. So moving from pre-contemplation to contemplation is the next bit. It may be quite scary to kind of think about moving from one step to another, but these things kind of happen quite organically once you've achieved one stage. So essentially the pre-contemplation is you've moved away from not recognizing the need for change, and then you start to move towards contemplation, which is where you start to recognize the problem and is really starting, a point in your life where you're considering change. So those in contemplation stage are thinking about taking action. They're not quite ready or don't know how to get started yet, and you might be able to kind of relate to that. Contemplators often think they may make the behavior within, the next 6 months. You might change the way that you're doing things, whether it's starting to do some exercise or changing your diet or, stopping smoking, whatever it might be. You think that you might be able to get there, but you're not quite ready and not quite sure how you're going to get there. But the positive thing is, if you are in the contemplation stage, you're open to information and feedback, which is really positive. And you look at the pros and cons relatively equally, whereas in the pre-contemplation, like we said, you tend to look at the cons and the costs. So since contemplators are open to new information, you can really start to build your enthusiasm for change by connecting to these core values or motivations, things that are meaningful to you, things that are important. And we'll talk about that concept of importance a little bit later on. You'll start to gather information, explore new perspectives, and you might even end up asking other people about their learned experiences as well, and examples where they've already made the change. The beauty of this is all of these discovery processes can help you shift away from just being a contemplator to then preparation. So let's just recap. So you're in the contemplation stage if you're no longer opposed to making a change in your life, but you're still sitting on the fence. But that's a good thing. You're on the fence, so you're considering things, which is really positive. Your ears might perk up when you hear someone talk about related subjects that are meaningful and important to you, that are related to this change that you've been thinking about. And whilst you're not actively looking for this information, when you stumble across them, like this, for example, you'll take a look, you'll take some interest, and you'll bear with it, and it'll help you kind of gain some confidence in imagining that change, how your life might be slightly different if you were to change. So, how do we move from contemplation to preparation? Let's have a look. So, moving from contemplation to preparation is really a great time to do the low commitment work, which is taking notes of thoughts and things that you'd like to do. And this will represent the change that you want to accomplish. And once it's on paper, it kind of becomes a little bit more real. It's also a good time to recognize that if you've been thinking about change for a while and not doing it, there's probably a reason. So it's good for you to kind of reflect on that as well. You might lack the necessary skills like exercising and the techniques on how to exercise and the knowledge about how many sets and how many repetitions and what will that do to my pain, what will that do to my function, what's the impact on me, and what fits me best. So reaching out for support to people like a physiotherapist is a really helpful idea. And if you can kind of reach out to physios that have been helpful to you in the past, that would be a good idea because you'll have confidence in the advice and the guidance that they've provided you. So let's have a look at preparation. So you've moved from pre-contemplation to contemplation to preparation, and that is where you're getting ready for change. People in the preparation stage are ready to take action. They are more decisive, confident, and committed. They're developing a plan and may have already taken a few small steps, which is again really positive. At this point, the pros of making the change clearly outweigh the cons. So you really start to lean towards the positive aspects of making this change in your life. So this stage is really about building confidence and problem solving against the obstacles or weaknesses that stand in the way of us kind of having that greatest chance of kind of achieving what we want to be able to achieve. This is the time where you go, what if, or if then? So what if that happens? Then you have a bit of a plan to kind of tackle it in terms of any of the challenges or temptations that you might face along the way that might make you revert back to old habits. And these could be external factors or internal factors, the way that you think and feel about things. And in all honesty, I guess, people tend to get stuck in preparation because you can prepare. Is it the right way? Is it this the right way to do it or not? But you've got to this stage, which is really positive. So next is really taking the move to action and initiating that change. So let's recap. So you're in the preparation stage if you're actively gathering information or seeking support, maybe even gearing up to kind of get things done and mentally preparing. And you feel nearly ready to take those first steps. You're feeling, in all honesty, really motivated. And you've been learning the skills along the way to make your change successful, like how to change your diet, when to change it, what best fits you and your lifestyle, when to exercise, how to exercise, what does that look like? So let's have a look at moving from preparation and that getting ready part to actually initiating change and doing it. So moving from preparation to action. This is when you sign up to that class, attend a support group, buy health club membership, bring home a sort of a pamphlet about services that might kind of help you. This might even be, if we're talking, about changing your diet or healthy lifestyle, this might be the point at where you amend the way that you write your shopping list, and you might start shopping in different supermarkets depending on cost, because sometimes changing your diet has a cost associated to it. It changes your budget. It's something new, so you're not too sure what it would cost. So you start to do a bit of investigation. You start clearing out the junk food out of your cupboards, so that actually you start preparing yourself, which is really positive. So action. We are now moving into action because you've embraced making this change, you're prepared, and actually you've thought about all the obstacles. So really, action is beyond just thinking about or preparing to act. A person in this phase is actually begun to do something about what they wanted to do, if that doesn't sound too confusing. Even if the changes are small, you're really starting to build momentum, knowledge, confidence about what you're doing, and you're encouraging yourself along the way. This is the time where you're taking small steps, making small choices and mini sacrifices, but they're making a huge difference, even in the first few weeks for you. It's something new and it's something exciting, and maybe that's the way that we should look at change. During the action stage, people are working to strengthen their commitment to the change, and external support is critical, even though you might not have asked for it. People in this stage tend to offer a lot of emotional context to what they're doing, and they really need that support sometimes from people around them. But that's really good because seeking support strengthens what you're doing, and it helps you keep yourself accountable for what you're doing as well. Encountering, I guess, old situations that might trigger unhealthy behaviors can be a bit of a risk at this stage. And what you're doing is consciously substituting your old habits for new habits. You might even post reminders on your fridge, on your smartphone, and give yourself notes to kind of what you need to do that day to continue making this action, bringing this change forward and making it real life, really, making it reality. So we know that action is an ongoing process. You don't have to be flawless in what you're doing. So give yourself a bit of breathing space, if you're not getting things 100% right every time. It is about that journey and making a change gradually. But if you make corrections to what you're doing or amend your nutritional plan that day because it doesn't quite fit with what you're doing that day, that's a really positive thing because it shows that you're adaptable, you're resilient, and you can be flexible to kind of changing in line with kind of your environment or, things that just crop up day to day, because that does happen. So to recap, you're in the action stage if you're implementing your action plan. Perhaps you ate your first healthy meal, completed your first round of workouts, or you got through your first few days as a non-smoker. So you just need to look at yourself in the mirror, give yourself a smile and say, actually, I did it. I did it today. I did it this week. That was really good. And I'm going to continue. Because now you've got that momentum, it should make it a little bit easier to continue. So it's now making action sustained. So going into the maintenance stage. The maintenance stage is really where you've sustained change or new behaviors, and they've replaced old behaviors. Individuals in the maintenance stage have managed to stay in action mode for at least 6 months. That means you've successfully avoided or overcome obstacles that could have essentially contributed towards you slipping back. But with practice, you've gained a lot more confidence, a lot more capacity to kind of continue with those new behaviors. And you've started to make those new behaviors really a part of your new life, your new lifestyle, and your identity and who you are. Therefore, the risk of relapse and going backwards is a lot lower. And I think that's where it comes from. Things become second nature. The way that you eat, what you have in the morning, when you exercise, But we do know that, there are several things essentially that can trigger people in the maintenance stage to relapse. Stress, crisis, apathy, boredom, a loss of sort of, emotional support, getting frustrated because things start to plateau a little bit. But this is where you need to kind of keep things interesting, recognize the times where things are just not moving forwards. You've been doing the exercises for so many months, but actually you're kind of losing a bit of interest because they're the same routine over and over again. The meal plan that you might have designed looks the same potentially. So what we need to look at is what constitutes a lapse in maintenance. And this really depends on kind of what happens at that point in time. It may be that you have a drink and you've stopped drinking for a little while. It might be that you start to snack on unhealthy food because when you feel a bit lethargic or fatigued, you crave kind of more sugary foods. So whenever you fall out of action, there is a question about whether you'll be back on track tomorrow or the day after, which means you're probably stepping out of that maintenance phase back into action, which isn't a bad thing. It's just good for you to recognize that, because you just need to go back to initiating that change again. You get up in the morning and you start afresh and go, right, I'm going to get back on with what I'd intended to do. And hopefully nothing comes up that kind of causes me to relapse or go back a step. So let's recap on this. You're in the maintenance stage if you've been there for at least 6 months, you've been really diligent and consistent in performing the actions you committed to as part of that sort of desired behavior change. And the next thing is kind of moving away from maintenance to termination. And this is where you've treated obstacles and unanticipated challenges as opportunities to kind of really strengthen the way that you think and feel and the way that you do things day to day. So the next thing is termination. So this is the opportunity where you expand your skills, you stay on track for at least 6 months to 2 years. And what you've been able to do is rally yourself and negotiate stresses and setbacks that you might have had along the way. And you've been successful to get yourself or maintain where you are with that behavior change. If relapse does occur, it can be because you've fallen out of, your new habits and fallen back into old habits. And then you might have to kind of look at, say, the cycle of change and where you are on that. Are you back at, I don't really recognize the need for this anymore? Or are you, I still recognize the problem and I'm going to consider making that change again? Or are you at, I'm getting ready for that change because I know what I'm doing? Well, you could be even back at the action stage in terms of tomorrow, I know what I'm going to do. I know where I kind of went wrong. Maybe some stress came up or things have happened in your life that have, contributed towards you not being able to kind of focus on your change, whether that's, again, nutrition or exercise, maintaining your function, looking at your lifestyle. And that all essentially comes from us learning from that relapse, looking at those challenges and those weaknesses that might come up and kind of look at them to kind of strengthen the way that you look at life and the way that you can make that change as well. So the next thing to look at is what can help me make that change. So we talked about a few areas in the contents earlier. We talked about readiness, willingness, importance, and confidence. So let's have a look at readiness first. How will that help me make a change? So being ready is a state of being prepared, and it's really a state of undertaking a new pattern of behaviors. And you really give yourself within that time a specific point at which you want to achieve those goals. So again, readiness is being prepared and being prepared to undertake a new pattern of behavior. So you need to ask yourself, how ready are you to make this change? So if you have a ruler to hand or just on a bit of paper, you can draw a line, and along that line you can mark 10 points along it evenly. So number the point 0 to 10 and then say to yourself, how ready are you to make this change? If you score yourself 0 to 3, it kind of feels like you're not ready, and it might indicate that you're at that sort of pre-contemplation. So the thoughts are there, but you're not really engaging with them, and you don't really recognize the need for change. If you score yourself 4 to 7, you're a little bit unsure about the change. You're starting to recognize the need for change. So you might have moved from pre-contemplation to contemplation, which is a positive step, but you need a little bit more encouragement. So again, we talked about getting that feedback, the fact finding, looking at services around you that can support you. And if you scored yourself 8, 9 or 10, you're ready to make that change. And actually, you probably are in that contemplation phase, but moving towards preparation because you're ready to make that change. Okay, so that's a really good way of testing or understanding how ready you are. And you can do that with any facet of your life. Mark yourself on a scale of 0 to 10, how ready are you? The next thing I want to look at is willingness. So the simple question is, so how is willingness going to help me make a change? So let's understand willingness a little bit more. Willingness really is a desire to embrace an alternative way of doing or being. Willingness to change is a measure of your thoughts and your emotional buy-in to that change specifically. So the way in which you think about that change and the way in which you feel about that change, that is what willingness is. It's a measure of that. So ask yourself 3 simple questions, and it will provide you with some insight of your willingness. So the first question is, have I tried anything previously to make progress towards my goals? This question really gets the ball rolling and lets you see how experienced you are in terms of changing your behavior, such as training, changing your nutritional plans, stopping smoking, anything significant that is meaningful to you. And it will also give you an idea of kind of your level of interest in those 2 areas. So the next question is, what specifically has stopped you in the past from reaching your goals? This one probably comes from left field a little bit and throws you a bit of a curveball, but it's a good way to look at asking yourself a very basic question, because you're really screening yourself to see, what's my attitude towards change? And am I willing to do it? Is it worth it? Sometimes you ask yourself, what's the difference going to be in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Because we all kind of want to know, so what's the impact of this change going to be? And I guess it's difficult because we don't always know what's around the corner or what's going to happen if we make a change. But that's why you have to kind of gather all that information and weigh up the pros and cons to kind of give you a sense of, I think I've got a better idea of why this change is good for me. So again, looking at that question specifically, what has stopped you in the past from reaching your goals? If you blame the reason of not reaching your goals on external factors, this really shows that you're deflecting the reason to these, unachievable goals, such as you might not have, not had enough time, too busy at work, your partner wasn't on board with you making the changes, so you didn't get that support. You've had to kind of maintain what you're doing day to day because of other people. So if you've got children or grandchildren or nieces, nephews, whoever it might be, and actually you might have stuff in the house in terms of junk food or sweets and biscuits because when they come round, that's what they want. Or equally, your partner might have that. They might want sugary foods in the house, and it kind of makes it more difficult for you to make that change. But this is all external factors. This is you deflecting the accountability and responsibility of making that change to other people and other things apart from yourself. Okay, again, the notion of wanting to change is kind of there, but you're not really sacrificing it at the expense of other people. But sometimes you've got to kind of put yourself first to kind of make that change for you. So consider that. If it's meaningful to you, are you willing to kind of put yourself first? The next one is using a bit of a scale like we did for the readiness ruler. So using a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being there's no way and 10 being definitely will do. Let's take this example. Would you be able to exercise for, I don't know, 15 minutes, 4 days a week? If you score yourself 10, definitely will do, it means you're willing to do it, that your willingness is high, and that will help you to kind of gauge, whether this change, excuse me, will be successful. And question 3 is the truest sort of measure of your willingness to change. And it's really actions speak louder than words. So have a look at that scale again. So a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is, I definitely will do it. And 1 is, there's no way I'm going to do that. So let's have a look at what the scoring means. And it really shows you your level of commitment to either a training plan or a new healthy lifestyle. So any number between 1 and 3 is a sign that you're probably not ready for much of change yet. And you might be around that sort of pre-contemplation phase. A number between 4 and 6 is okay. And a small change is possible. So actually anything maybe between contemplation and preparation. And a number between 7 and 10 is a good sign that you're ready to go. And you're going to take yourself into that action phase. So again, it identifies where you are on that cycle. So the next thing I want to look at is the concept of having 2 futures. And we're going to look at confidence and importance just after that. So it might sound really simple, but once you've established what you want to do, e.g. regular exercise 3 times a week for the next 6 months to 2 years or forever, that will kind of show you what you're aiming for. This is a really nice concept, and you've got to ask yourself, what will your future look like if you make that change? And essentially, what would your future look like if you didn't make that change? So if you didn't, say, stop smoking, or you didn't alter your nutritional plan, or just the way that you eat day to day, make it simple. Or if you didn't start exercising, what would your future look like? And then on the flip side, if you did make those changes, what would your future look like? What would it look like in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Would you feel healthier? Would you be managing your pain better? Would you be more functional? Would you be able to do more hobbies and day-to-day things that you've wanted to do for a while that you've been limited at? So it's really looking at 2 futures and just putting it down on paper to make it a little bit more real. So the little note in the top right-hand corner says, do something today that your future self will thank you for. It's not always possible to talk to your future self, but your future self will no doubt thank you for making an exercise change, an activity, a change in your nutritional plan, a healthier lifestyle, looking at more positive habits in your life, even the way that you think and feel about things, being more positive and motivated and confident. So have a look at that 2 futures concept, and it will really start to highlight the importance of making that change and actually what your futures might look like if you did or you didn't. So the next thing to do is look at importance. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how important is it for you to make this change? So look at the scale, it says 0, not important. Then we've got 5. Then we've got 10, very important. So progressing to this stage is integral to achieving the application of behavior change. Have a think about that for a moment. Have you ever asked yourself, how important is something to you? So we start to identify our own self-confidence and our own confidence in us being able to achieve goals. So this process really allows us to consider how capable you are of performing these activities. Okay, so by identifying how important someone believes a behavior change in activity will be, you really start to get a bit of insight into how likely you are to complete that activity. And by completing that activity, your self-confidence grows. Actually, by starting to achieve goals, your self-efficacy grows. So if you score 0, this is not really that important to me in terms of making that change. Low perceived importance will likely result in poor compliance to achieving that goal, or in the way that you change your lifestyle, e.g. performing exercises, or again, nutrition, or any lifestyle choices that you're kind of embarking on for, the sake of managing your condition better and making it more successful. And then if something is really important, obviously, your likelihood of achieving that goal or making that change is going to be far higher because it means something to you. If something means something to you, it kind of makes it more likely that you're going to embark on that change and make it. So ask yourself 3 questions. Why did you score the number that you did? What would need to happen for you to move up on the scale, and how achievable do you think this is? So why did I score doing exercises isn't that important to me? Maybe you don't understand the benefits. Maybe you need to kind of get a bit of clarity on how exercise can help you with pain management, how it can make you more physically resilient. But then equally, the same goes for nutrition and the other aspects, stopping smoking, how that affects your cardiovascular system, how that affects the oxygen within your bloodstream, and how that impacts on how your body repairs and strengthens. So what would need to happen for you to move up on the scale? So to make stopping smoking important, or doing exercises, or increasing the amount of exercise you do, you might need to get some advice on that to make it feel a little bit more tangible and important because you understand it more. And how achievable do you think this is? Well, going to your GP, or talking to a physiotherapist, or talking to people that have been in the same situation as you is also quite useful. So let's have a look at confidence. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how confident do you feel about making this change? So you're not confident in making this change, which is 0, or very confident. So the same is really true of confidence. Generally, people have low confidence in doing something new because it's new to you and you don't really know kind of the reason for doing it. Why is it important to you to practice home exercises with your physiotherapist? Changing beliefs about importance and confidence really allows you to start questioning old behaviors that were sort of even greater in terms of importance to you earlier on in your life. And making that new change is really important. So why did you score the number that you did? So 0, not confident, and 10, very confident. What would need to happen for you to move up on the scale, and how achievable do you think that is? So if you scored doing exercises or changing your exercise regime as I'm not confident in doing that, why is that? What would need to happen for you to make it a 5 or a 10? And how achievable do you think that is? It's probably achievable if you talk to, let's say, a trainer at a local gym or a physiotherapist. And if you want to talk about nutrition, you can talk to a nutritionist and you get some really good advice following some of the modules that we're presenting for you as well. So actually it's quite achievable to start moving that up on the scale from sort of not confident 0 to very confident 10. So the next thing to talk about is, how do I sustain change? So it really kind of looks at what can hold you back. So know well what holds you back and what moves you forward. So let's start there. So what holds you back? So hitting a plateau might hold you back. Getting bored or distracted might hold you back. And losing track of your original motivation after an initial success. So it's really kind of focusing on why you're doing this in the first place, or an unexpected setback or an injury, feeling a little bit tired or fatigued or overwhelmed can kind of prevent you from moving from maintenance to that termination phase where you've gone, right, I've done it now. I can move on to the next change because I've been able to maintain it for 6 months to 2 years. And now I can kind of embark on a different type of change in my life. So what will move you forward? So continuing to hone supportive and stress management skills, avoiding situations that could trigger relapse, and really spending time with other people who engage in the same positive behaviors as you. And I think sometimes that's the thing. If you have people around you that are doing it, you're more likely to kind of follow and be able to maintain those sorts of behaviors through to that termination phase, which means you've sustained that change, which is really, really positive. So moving from maintenance to termination, let's recap what we talked about earlier on. So treat obstacles and unanticipated challenges as opportunities to develop new strengths. So have a look at those weaknesses and those obstacles that come up and go, do you know what? I'm going to take advantage of this and I'm going to learn from it. And I'm going to be a stronger person by doing so. And it will build my confidence, my self-esteem, my readiness and willingness to kind of keep going with this change. Ward off boredom by taking on new challenges and expanding your skills. So that might be changing your nutritional plan month to month or your exercise routine month to month, just to keep things interesting. And this will help you stay on that maintenance path for 2 years or more. So the next thing to look at is some key messages. You've got lots of different choices available to make a positive change to managing a chronic or long-term condition in respect of kind of chronic pain. It really starts to kind of put in perspective what you can do to kind of manage that situation for you personally. So whether that's changing your exercises, starting to exercise, having a regular regime, looking at your nutrition, looking at your self-confidence, looking at mindfulness and kind of stress-related interventions, kind of help you focus, looking at smoking cessation, and really learning, about pain and resilience and how to be physically and psychologically resilient. So lots of things available. Do something that is simple because it will just make it so much easier just to start. Sustainable because you'll be able to kind of keep going with it because it doesn't take too much effort or it's not a burden. And something that's important to you, meaningful, because you're more likely to buy into it emotionally and the way in which you look at the world. So it really has to be personal and meaningful to you, the way in which you do things and the way in which it fits your lifestyle. And essentially, without being too philosophical, and I hope you've enjoyed today, you've got one life and live it well, live it as best as you can in the best interest of yourself. Thank you.